We're live. Hello, everyone. It's Thursday afternoon here in California on the Pacific Coast, and that means it's time for Sup Connect Live, which I have been doing for a couple of years now. Thoroughly enjoy meeting and talking to people online here on Instagram on Sup Connect's account about their paddling life, how they got started, and the many different things that our different guests are into, because stand-up paddling is so versatile. It can be done anywhere on any kind of water. Today, we're getting back to basics with Ethan Huff, originally from the Midwest, lives in Mexico. So, and I'm going to call him a SUP educator, not just an instructor, because we'll talk about the different ways that he reaches people. And I think it's super interesting what he's doing down in La Paz, which I'm wearing my Cali shirt. I usually try to find some t-shirt associated with who I'm talking to. He is in Baja, California, so that's about the closest I could get. I didn't have any t-shirts in Espanol. So I am going to look now and see if I can find Ethan. Interestingly, there's an event we're both interested in, which was kind of random how I met him. Oh, why is my keyboard coming up? Come on now, go away. Oh, Pastor Tim, maybe related. There is the Huff name, and Lawrence, good to see you. Leanne, there's Ethan. Okay, I've invited you on, and this is that moment of truth. Will we get that split screen, and will he be joining us? Yes!
Here we are. Hey, Kristen.
So happy when it works. So you're a technology guy.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that more, but I'm always nervous that this step isn't going to happen.
No, absolutely.
Pretty
I appreciate you
straightforward.
representing with your shirt as well.
Thank you so much for joining today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
We are in the same time zone, aren't we? Pacific time?
Close. Actually, surprisingly, Baja California is actually in the mountain time zone. So
Oh, okay.
1 hour difference, but pretty close.
And then there's that strange thing with daylight savings that happens in some places but not others.
Yeah, we're like delayed from the States for some reason, so it can be complicated sometimes.
Well, I'm glad you figured it out. Glad you're here.
Absolutely.
So you're originally from the U.S. You said your Midwest background. Was
Mhm.
water involved in that at all, or was it not till you moved to Mexico?
A little bit. I mean, on our property growing up, we had like a large pond. So Midwest life, we just played around the pond. We did redneck things like tying a rope to a tractor and taking the rope across the pond, like doing knee boarding with that. But no, I didn't get into stand-up paddle boarding until later on in life. We moved to Mexico, but still played around in the water growing up, obviously, but not too much.
But you were outdoors, and you were an athlete, and you did
Yes.
things like motorcycles and
Mm-hmm.
track and field, so definitely had that athletic interest. So tell us about that first time and how you felt, because we've heard many stories about people's first paddleboarding experience.
Oh, yeah. My absolute first time was in the Midwest, going to a friend's lake, and they had like a super small, like soft top board from like Walmart or something. Something with super low amount of liters in it, like literally like sinking below my feet trying to stand on this thing. But like, it was just fun playing around on it. Like, this is kind of a fun concept. I've seen some people do it, but obviously it was impossible to take it seriously on that board underneath my feet. But that was my first absolute exposure to it. So it's kind of in the back of my mind, like, that's kind of a cool concept, but I don't know if I ever like get into it or not, and just kind of like put it off to the side for the time being. And when we moved to Mexico is when we relocated to Puerto Vallarta, and that's when obviously being next to the ocean there, seeing so many people on the water stand paddleboarding there, like, okay, now's the time to try this thing again, but maybe on a better sized board, more for my body. So I rented a board from a place there and tried it out, and had a way better experience. Actually could stand up, actually paddle around for the first time. It's a little more challenging, obviously, on the open water of the ocean there. So that was way different than a lake setting, but still, like, just something about it was so much fun to try, and something, a new concept to kind of push myself and learn new techniques and kind of figure out. And so after that time, I was kind of hooked, and after that, purchased my first board and started on my journey from there.
Yeah, I know we've interviewed a couple people from Sayulita, because that's a real hub, and I have been there a couple times. They used to have a really big race down there. So that's one community. I know, I'm sure in Vallarta proper and some of the other cities nearby, I'm sure it's popular too. But did you get out to the coast there in Sayulita?
Yeah, a few times. Like, I have some friends who live up there as well, and just going over there because obviously you have a little more waves coming in, so you practice some sub surfing as well, which is a lot of fun because inside the bay of Banderas, where Port of Arts is at, there's a little bit less wave action going on in terms of surfing waves. So it's fun having the variety of going out to Sailito with some friends to kind of experience that community out there, and also the community in Port of Arts as well. So definitely, it was nice having such a wide variety in such a small location.
Yeah. So you're no longer in Puerto Vallarta, so I don't know when you moved up, but you're in Baja. So
Yeah.
La Paz, I love hearing about, and people I'm sure will go see your YouTube channel that we're going to talk about, as well as your Instagram, and see the beauty behind you on the water, but very different than, I mean, that's one of the lovely things about stand-up paddleboarding, is going different places and seeing something different. So a little more jungly and green down in Puerto Vallarta.
Yep.
Definitely drier in Baja, one of my favorite places. I don't get down your way as often, but let's talk some more about that and the location. But is that where you first started your business, Perfect Paddle?
Yeah, so it's the first start of the original, or the credit school I started here in Baja. And so I'm in La Paz, I was doing some classes over there, instructing some things more on the side. And over here, there just wasn't really any kind of like established school set up. So I figured, well, I'm here now, I have the skills, and so I kind of have the resources to start an accredited school on the side. So I started that up here to kind of provide more of an official, I guess, setting for people to come and learn stand-up paddleboarding from just the higher education and safety side of things. And so, yeah.
Super important, because some people will say, because there's the beauty of it that it's fairly easy, but you're a living example of getting the right equipment's important, safety is essential. There's so much to learn in that first lesson. You know, we really encourage people to do that, which I think during the pandemic, at least in this area, a lot of people started and didn't have the opportunity to take lessons because things weren't open. I also love that you call it a school. Like I was just talking to, I don't know if you know, Mike Euchre, who does Stand Up Magazine. It's in German, yesterday.
Okay.
We don't in the US have much of a waterman type club concept. Like Australia has their coastal clubs, and everybody belongs to a place where you leave your boogie board or your surfboard or your equipment. The boathouse kind of thing, more inland, but again, it's not like the UK seems to have everybody belongs to a club. And I think that would be so great in uniting stand-up paddleboarding and other water vessels too. We have Outrigger that's pretty big here, but they kind of have their own club, and they don't necessarily have a clubhouse the way like yacht clubs do. But I love that you have a school, and we need more of that. You know, we talk about all ages and being able to help. So you have a school there, but I'm really intrigued with, because I think during the pandemic, using video is how so many people start so many things. I mean, you can go find a video on how to do anything. So really think you have great resources there. So would love to pick your brain. I already saw, I think Maria is online here, who said, okay, I'm a beginner, you know, looking for some tips, but also even those of us who've paddled for a dozen years, to go back and like, oh, I'd never thought of it that way. You might explain it a different way, or things that aren't mentioned. I saw one of your quick videos was about, for instance, your fin and like walking out to the depths, and people don't, you know, we think that's just obvious, but it isn't. Nothing's obvious when something's new to you. You know, I've seen people trying to paddle backwards with their fin in front, and
it's crazy.
All kinds of interesting things. So we'll talk about both from your YouTube and your experience in person paddling. I know you're certified through ASI. I want to mention that just because there's a few big organizations that do kind of worldwide international paddling, and you're an accredited school through them, which I think is a good thing that I didn't realize they were doing. So but let's just start with some tips about different things, or what are, like, your YouTube videos, what are the most hit upon, or whatever the word is, watched?
Oh man, well, I've been doing YouTube super long. I've only been doing it for like 5 months. I've dabbled in the past with some other channels, but it's the first time I sat down. Like, I'm gonna take it seriously and just focus on paddling techniques. And so the first video that kind of took off is called like the 5 biggest mistakes beginner paddleboarders make. And one of those tips is like talking, like I said, people walk into the water, in too shallow water, putting their board down, and their fin just literally gets stuck on the ground or sand behind them. And it seems like common sense, even to a beginner, to think about, but when you're in the moment and you have all the adrenaline going through your body, this new board in your hands, this new paddle going in the water, you just don't think about these things. So I mean, people go in the water and just set it down and get stuck and damage their fin or their board doing that as well. So that's a super common one. And also another really common one is people just paddling around with their paddle backwards. As we all know, like all paddle blades have a curve to it and a face to them. And so a lot of people think for some reason it's better to have it the other way around with the face facing backwards and the curve facing towards your feet. And so, yeah, some people still have mixed opinions on that. I have people comment on my videos saying I'm doing it wrong still. And so I just try to give them the resources that I also get my information from, the way I've learned from, and see these are why we do what we do for these paddles. The tanks behind as well, so that's really common. But yeah, just all kinds of basic stuff. Like people ask all the time too, like where am I supposed to wear my leash? Like do I put a leash around my ankle or I put it around my knee? Like I see pictures of people doing it this way and other people doing it this way. Like what way should I be doing it? And so a lot of things too, like just don't necessarily have like a right or wrong answer to them. It's more of like knowing the full concept behind the question and also why people will do certain things one way and why people do certain things another way. So.
And I think you mentioned in the leash thing, just because I think some of these things there's definitely mistakes that are made that, you know, where does this leash go? So they attach it to their paddle or, I mean, I've seen, there are paddle leashes, but that's another topic.
Yes.
But I think we still though need to keep talking about these things because we did adopt from canoe and kayak and from surfing a lot of safety and other resources because we're on a board with a paddle that I think still need to be tweaked to maximize stand-up paddleboarding. So I mentioned to you just because in racing, when I surf, absolutely, there's a reason the leash is attached to the back of the board and you need it to go away from you, how you pull it back. But in racing, we fall off and we get on kind of in the middle of the board. So I was noting some of the top pros attaching their leash, shorter leash and in front of them so they can walk the board to pivot turn. And I thought, oh, that might be, and then the whole, you know, we have had, as with any water sport, we've had some deaths. So some of the safety things that are super important, you need to be able to get it off. And you mentioned that in that video about, that's one thing I like about a calf, which somebody told me doesn't work as well on men. I don't know why.
I don't know, same calf.
but basically you need to, if you're being pulled away and your board is separate, you have to be able to get your leash off. So we need to keep looking at the quick release idea or wearing them higher, whether that's waist or something like that. So safety wise, what are some of the first things that you do in that initial, what should people know? What do people need to have?
Yeah. I mean, it really just comes back down to the person's ability in terms of their confidence in the water, as well as their ability, like how well are they good at treading water, swimming, things like that. To have any exposure to like water experience in the past in terms of the ocean or on lakes. So a lot of times people try to use a leash or use a life jacket and use that as their fallback to save their life in a bad situation. The reality is they should be aware of the situation they're putting themselves into in the first place, such as conditions on the water, the wind, tides, waves, all kinds of conditions that really take a factor in whether you should be going on the water in the first place with your experience. And so really we're going to try to get new people involved in the sport. We talk about kind of those safety aspects behind the things, like understanding the environment we're putting ourselves into and understanding that the things we're wearing, the things we're attaching to us are resources to help us in tough situations, but they're not necessarily there to be our fallback with our lack of experience per se. And so understanding the difference between we're using these things like a leash or a life jacket to help us in these situations, but also don't try to use that as your excuse for not trying to learn the proper techniques or use that as your excuse for going out into a horrible situation in the water we shouldn't be out there in the first place. And so a lot of times I talk about that kind of stuff first with people as they're getting to stand-up paddleboarding, so they understand those concepts first before we talk about, okay, well, this is why we use a leash now, these are ways we can use a leash properly. As well as life jackets for people who are interested in learning more about life jackets and the reason why not we use life jackets on paddle boards. So there's kind of a safety concepts behind those ideas as well. So for me, I try to go back to the basics. So for example, for me, I learned a lot about the water safety and training through ASI. So they're very heavily focused on, yes, teaching people how to do proper stand paddle techniques, but also focusing probably majority of the training on safety side as well in terms of understanding those conditions. So for me, it's super helpful because as a beginner, when I started back in 2018, those things were all new to me, and things I was more focused on learning techniques on a paddleboard and wasn't there just focused on trying to learn the safety aspects of my environment around me and how that's just as important, if not more important, than learning the techniques first. And so that's really what I try to focus on first with people who are new to sport is let's understand our environment first and let's understand how to use our equipment in that environment properly. So.
Right, and knowing the self, such excellent points, and it's so true that I think a lot of people, when they approach water, don't think of all those things that are so essential. Um, where's my skill level?
Mm-hmm.
And where, like you said, that safety equipment, it makes me a little nervous that people go out who don't know how to swim. But
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't think that's a great idea. But if they do, I sure hope they have that inherently,
Yeah.
the flotation device, the
Yes.
full life jacket rather than just a PFD that can blow up.
Mm-hmm.
And like somebody I train with, our coach says, you should be able to swim to shore.
Yeah.
So if you're not a swimmer, if you're not comfortable with that, you should not be going very far from the shore because,
Yep.
nature happens all the time,
Exactly.
and things change and
Mm-hmm.
conditions change and what the state you're in might change too. So
Mm-hmm.
excellent. Glad to hear that your school is, as any school should be, that safety has to be a really important part of education. And there's
Absolutely.
something that people haven't thought about there.
Mm-hmm.
But then getting into technique stuff, I know that one of the aha moments I had some years in, and I know I was doing some things, was that my paddle wasn't just for forward momentum. I mean, I was so focused on how do I maximize that. So that's a whole set of tips that we might share. But what are the other uses of a paddle? I mean, turning and
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah,
type.
there's so many, obviously, there's so many things to do with the paddle. I mean, more than just propelling yourself forward. Like, one of the biggest things people don't realize is your paddle is a great source to balance as well. And so, like, any experienced paddler realize or knows that they use their paddle daily to provide balance for them, especially people on the narrow race boards. Like, they're constantly using their paddle to lean on it, to apply pressure to it, to regain their balance, or they're in choppy conditions to steady themselves. And so, well, I love sharing with people how, like, if you feel like you're falling to a certain side, like, you position your paddle a certain way on the side of you to brace against. It's almost like an extra arm you have that's in the water. And so I love sharing with people, like, you feel like you're gonna fall to the right hand side, get that paddle on your right hand side, and you're gonna turn your blade at a certain angle to where you can actually lean on that. Now, obviously, you just can't put all your weight on it because you're gonna fall right into the water anyways, but you can use that still to pressure on from time to time to rebalance yourself on the paddle board. So I love that use of the paddle. It's fun too, like when I teach people like basic concepts of doing like a pivot turn, like we'll just, if they're brand new, like we'll just sit on our butts and we'll slide to the back of the board and we'll raise our front of the board out. Like, all right, now we're practicing how to use our paddle on this technique. And so we'll put our paddle way out to the side of us and do a big sweeping circle. And we'll learn how different size circles you do or the lower or the smaller strokes you take will affect how fast or how slow you turn the board on a pivot turn. And once they kind of like understand the concept of the paddle by just sitting down, then we can go back to our feet and talk about how to walk back with our feet position. Because as you know, the first time you do that, it's really hard to just find your balance with your feet. And so it's easier to kind of learn the concepts first with how to move your paddle and then go back to our feet and try to apply the same concepts but standing up with our feet.
That's brilliant. I haven't heard of that, but what a great idea. I can absolutely picture that and how much a feel you get for what you're doing without having to deal with the balance issues, which are the big challenge. That's great. Yeah. So while we're talking turns, of course, pivot turns, a lot of people like that because it's something very unique to stand-up paddle. It looks cool. Yeah. But what are some other turning methods, since we have some beginners on here, that you suggest? Because that is definitely a roadblock at the beginning. Okay, I'm going forward. How do I get back going that way? Yeah, the most basic turn I teach beginners especially is how to just do the big sweeping stroke. And so we put our paddle, and instead of having our paddle flat as we paddle forward, we now turn at an angle. So it's almost like flat with your paddle board, the side of it. We enter that blade to the front of our paddle board, and we do a big sweeping stroke all the way around to the back of our board. You're making like a big half circle. And so we talk about that concept of just, we're doing a slow turn to our left, we do big sweeping circles on our right-hand side. But if we're also just trying to turn in just one spot and kind of pivot in one location, we also need to change sides. So we'll start one side, do a big sweeping stroke on one side, and we'll change our hands, but now we'll start from the back of the board and go to the front of the board. So you're making like a complete circle with your paddle. And that allows them to turn in one spot more quickly. And also a big one to know for people too is like, well, if they're going the wrong direction and like they need to stop, like just how to put your paddle in the water, even just to slow yourself down, but also understanding to brace on your paddle too when you put it in the water that way as well, not just fall forward on your board. But that's the most basic concept I teach for people for how to turn is getting that paddle in front of them, reaching out around the side of them. I teach kind of shorten their hands on the paddle a little bit more as well, so they can reach that paddle further out. Because of the lower hands further down the paddle, they kind of make a smaller circle. So if we can allow that paddle to reach further out in front of us, then we get a bigger sweeping circle to take us around. There you go. The sweeping circle. I love that. The
Yeah.
sweep concept, I think, helps them get their hands, you know,
Yes.
after like working on the efficiency and that straight up and down. It's a
Yeah.
different motion. But
It
I've
is a
seen
different motion. Yeah.
in seeing a lot of beginners lately, I'm surprised. I think if you've been on the water and done anything with a paddle, you have a little more feel. Like people will naturally
Hmm.
maybe paddle, which can be a
Yeah.
useful thing to be able
Hmm.
to do. But I've seen
Hmm.
lately just, not even switching hands, trying to like
Yeah.
paddle on both sides with the hands and
Yes.
not using the top. Um,
Yep.
Really like, wow, that's interesting to me that they would even think that that's
I
a
know.
thing.
Yeah.
This is what happens sometimes when you're just completely, on your own trying to figure it out with it, even though it seems, and again, the
Hmm.
paddle backwards all the time,
Yep.
like things like fin forward. And, if
Hmm.
if you've never surfed, like where does a
Yep.
leash go? If
Hmm.
you don't have paddle experience, how do you even hold this big long
Yeah.
thing?
Exactly. Yep.
So a
Like,
lot of that kind of stuff, a lot of basics that are important. So, were you multilingual in 2018 when you moved to Puerto Vallarta, or is that
I
been
should
a
have been, but I wasn't. My mom actually grew up in Mexico as a missionary kid, and so like she has fluent Spanish. She knows the culture super well, and so I should have learned it growing up. But I have three younger brothers and just four boys in the house. Like, oh, we don't need Spanish, so we just never took it seriously. And of course, now here I am living in Mexico, and so my wife and I moved to Mexico in 2017. We came down here as missionaries, and we took a full year just focusing on learning the culture and the language. To like 10 months of intensive language learning in the school, which was super exhausting. But thankfully now we're able to obviously like have good conversation in Spanish. I can do classes in Spanish as well. So it's
so
definitely nice
that's
having that ability.
so you do classes in English and Spanish as needed in La Paz.
Yes.
I'm sure you get lots of American tourists because we
Hmm.
go to Baja a lot.
Yeah.
Your side is Andre. We have from Russia, Ukraine. I don't know where he is right now.
Nice.
So we do get people from all over the world. I saw we had
Yeah.
somebody in Florida. Really fun. A lot of South America. So
Hmm.
that's awesome. Congratulations and impressed that you and so your wife didn't know Spanish either. Together you went
Yeah. She knew
and learned
some
it.
from her hotel experience in the States, but yeah, we still have a lot to learn, both of us.
Good for you. Well, I hope you give, it sounds like you have a family and
Hmm.
I hope you give your kids Spanish. Your mom,
Yes. That's
I'm,
Yep. That's our goal.
yeah, former teacher here says before the age of 5, they need to be introduced to another language
Oh
and
yeah.
you'll be good at any language later in life, which I think
Mm.
we don't do usually, or a lot of us don't have a second language to share. So really
No,
cool.
absolutely.
So talk about the La Paz area. That's
Hmm.
I think of it as the wind tunnel because I have wind sport
Yes.
friends who live in to the
La
south of
Ventana.
Los Barriles and forgot the
Hmm.
other town right
Yeah,
there.
the popular one's La Ventana.
Yes, yes, that's the better known one.
Hmm.
So you have wind part of the year.
Yep.
It's kind of a beautiful, more stark environment, but I understand underwater is amazing. And that's one of my
Hmm.
favorite things about stand-up paddleboarding. If there's clear
Yes.
water, you can see what's underwater. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, La Paz is great because this whole area is like known for their turquoise waters, so you can see all the sea life below you, and there's a lot of shallow bays, so it's great for just exploring around. It's also really nice too in this area, especially for beginner paddlers. Is there's no waves, and like it's generally like lake-like conditions all the time going to the coastline here. Like just very little to no shore break at all. We do have to be cautious at times of the wind picking up, but other than that, great conditions for paddling and exploring around. There's so many like secluded beaches. It's definitely more of a remote area still. La Paz itself is a good sized town, but once you get outside the city, like it's very remote. So we love going out to some different beaches around here and exploring those different areas. And like, there's great places to get in the water and smoke around to see the fish life. And yeah, it's honestly an incredible place to learn stand-up paddle boarding for those who are new to it, but also for those who love exploring and just seeing new locations. Like the turquoise waters with the desert backdrop is just really cool to see, and it's definitely an incredible experience.
Yeah. So if you ever go to La Paz, you can definitely look Ethan up,
Hmm.
Perfect Paddles, and find him there. Yeah. So let's go back to some tips. I mean, your channel looks really great. I know YouTube and there's others. I'm
Hmm.
still not clear on how they all work and well, you need 1,000
Yeah.
followers. So
Yeah.
what exactly is your YouTube called so people can find it? Ethan
Hmm.
Huff.
Yeah, it's called Ethan Huff, so it's just my name.
Okay.
So, yeah, so you look,
Perfect.
look on the
That should be
channel
easy
there.
to
You can
find.
click on my Instagram account and you just find the link on there as well. So
Yeah, and your Instagram has SUP added, right, Ethan?
Yeah, so it's Ethan Huff, and then I used to have the name Ocean Step on there, which is the name of my paddleboard school here, but currently mine is just called Ethan Huff currently. So just Ethan Huff Sup is my Instagram.
Okay, so it's Ocean SUP down there in Pause. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I ran into you actually. You know, we were on the same email chain about an event that's coming up that I think is super interesting, and I just want to know because it's unique in stand-up paddleboarding. So, and I don't know if you've raced before, but I know you signed up. So it's our Continental Association under Canoe and Kayak, which is all of the Americas. I used to know. Is that 28 countries, I believe?
Somewhere around there.
North, Central, and South. Anyway, almost 30 countries I think we have in the Americas. And it's in Mexico. It's in the Yucatan in late November. But what's fascinating to me, and ICF hasn't done before, which is international, is you do need to sign up through your country's organization. So having done that, and a lot of my stand-up paddle friends, some who might be listening, have not done that yet. Was it hard? What steps did you go through? How'd you even find this race?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting better in Mexico, but I mean, a lot of sub races too around the world are just harder to get information on a lot of times. And so thankfully I found this one through my contacts in like in Puerto Vallarta and Sayulita area. And I was able to find a contact number finally for the person kind of hosting the event in that area of Yucatan. So I sent them a message, and also knowing Spanish helps, so I can kind of talk to them a little bit in Spanish. And then finally I got the contact information. We're learning that in order to apply for the event, you apply as from the United States because I'm an American citizen. So once I figured that out, then I figured, okay, well, who's going to represent the United States at this event? Because I don't know who it is. And so she said, well, it's the ACA. It's like, okay, so that's when I send them an email saying, this is the event that's going on.
Yeah.
What can I do to get signed up for this? And that's when the process started of actually getting signed up for the event.
Right. Just because I have worked somewhat with the ICF, and it's a big challenge because unless you come from canoe and kayak or have experience in some Olympic level event, you haven't gone through your federation necessarily. So it's a whole learning curve. So good for you for being super proactive and getting at it. So Maui, who actually lives in Germany, he's German, and I just saw him in Poland. He's asking if this is the Pan Am Games. So it is the Pan American Association, but the Pan Am Games, as you know them, are only every 4 years. That's our continental, like the big thing. So this isn't that one. But they are asking you to go through your national federation. So if anybody in any of the Americas is interested, it looks like an awesome event. There's a 15K distance, I think, for stand-up. They're pairing us with ocean racing, which is surf skis. So I don't know if you do that too, but I actually have friends who do both. And yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I thought, they might be interested.
Yeah.
But you do need to contact, if you're American, it's the ACA. Otherwise, it's your Canoe and Kayak Association. I'm not sure how much you follow the big picture, but it's very interesting in stand-up racing because the Surfing Association and Canoe and Kayak do things. And then we have a lot of other events that aren't attached to either one.
Yep.
Yeah. So it should be a really cool event. Looking forward to learning more about it. So thanks for being proactive because that was the first email I'd seen that somebody was registering was you going ahead and doing that. I do believe in some countries, like I do believe Mexico had a tryouts of some sort, maybe. And so the sprint racing, they're only having 2 men, 2 women, and 2 boys and girls and juniors. So that one is more restricted, but the distance race is wide open.
It's open, yeah.
And what's fun about an organized event is it looks like they have the hotel and the meals come with it, and they pick you up at the airport. It's all part of a package deal, which as someone who loves the destination event, I won't even call it a race because it is more about the event. It's going to a cool new place.
Yeah.
I think that's such a cool part. We have some OGs here. Andre, who I mentioned, I don't know if you saw that list, if you can read this, but all the different places he's coached and lived in Eastern Europe and coached for China and all.
Wow.
So people do get around. He's someone, as a former Olympic candidate, does know these systems. And so some people do register through countries, but that will be, if I do it, that'll be my first time of actually paying an organization, and then they pay the people who are running the race. So that should be fun.
Yeah.
Let's get back to
to some more tips. So the actual, we kind of talked a little bit about turning, about safety. How about just to maximize your forward momentum? That's really specific, but maximizing your paddling efficiency, maybe that's a better word.
Yeah. That definitely comes like later on as well. Like the first part for beginners, especially, is learning to improve their balance. Because without the balance, it's really hard to apply the next techniques you need to learn for the phases of the paddle stroke. So people like, they have all different phases they call it. I was taught through the ASI program, so they call it their 5 phases of your entry, your catch, your power phase, your exit, and your recovery. And so once people are kind of getting their balance, and I've taught them some basic techniques of how to paddle straight, we'll focus on those 5 phases, and that really helps you paddle much more efficient, paddle have a lot more power when you're paddling forward as well. So focus on that, all those phases. So the entry, really entering your paddle correctly in the water, and also entering at a vertical with your paddle blade as well. So this is really a big step for beginners to learn, because a lot of times people are paddling along with their shaft at an angle, and also just using their biceps to pull themselves to the water. Super chill, and like I respect anybody who does that. Like if you're just going for a chill paddle and you want to paddle along like that, just kind of cruising along, like totally go for it. Like I'm not going to say you're wrong doing that. For those who want to improve and want to have some more power on the paddle, like, okay, well, now let's focus more on our form and how to actually set up our body to position ourselves well to enter that paddle more vertically in the water, to have a good entry phase and then have a good catch where our blade is fully submerged in the water. So big mistakes a lot of people make is not really focusing on having their blade fully buried in the water before they pull themselves to it. So it creates a lot of splash, and it just creates a lot of just wasted energy because you're not making full use of that power blade that you're using in the water. And so really make sure you bury that blade fully in the water. Then once you do that, that's why it's called a catch, because then we're catching that water. But instead of using our arm muscles, we're really focused on using our core muscles. So we talk about how to engage our core muscles and our leg muscles by using our hips to kind of connect everything together, catching that water with that paddle, and then use core muscles in the power phase to pull yourself to that paddle. Then we're exiting around your feet, and then we're exiting the paddle around there, recovering, doing whatever we need to do to get ourselves set up for the next phase of the paddle stroke, and going back up once again and entering that blade again. So once again, we call it just the entry, catch, power, exit, and recovery.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great description of those things. I love that you started with balance, though, because that's what I definitely have found in talking to people. Sometimes they're just not ready to take that step to do any kind of a rotation, to move their hand over so that their hands are stacked, or you know, you have to be comfortable enough to do that. But it is interesting when they go and paddle, they said, I thought this was, you know, supposed to be really good for your whole body. And they're just using their arms. Like, well, it can be, but
yes, like my feet hurt, my hands hurt.
But I love, as simple as it is, it can be as complicated as you want it to. Again, I've been at it for 12 years, and there's still, I love thinking that we haven't maximized, and there's still little tricks of the trade or shape of the board, or is there so many things that still might change that can still move the dial and move it forward. Let's talk about equipment a little bit, because you instruct, you live in a pretty warm area. I think I saw you on one of the newer starboard inflatables. Is that what you use for the most part?
That's what I use for the most part now. So it's been interesting because until this year, I never used inflatable boards before until this year. Mostly allowed me to travel more easily, because we also know traveling with hard boards, especially on the airlines, is next to impossible. And so just allowing me to travel more and see more people and connect with more people. Like, I chose to do the inflatable for this next season, for right now anyways. But yeah, so far, like, that's done really well in the heat. I was skeptical at first because it is extreme heat here. Like, we definitely have temperatures above 100 degrees with extreme UV index. And so end of the day, I do teach people, if you have a inflatable board in those conditions, to be cautious of leaving it in direct sunlight, especially. Many people, I've seen it time and time again, will go out for a beach day in these hotter climates, and their board will just overinflate and just literally explode on the beach. And it's usually a more common problem with the lower grade paddle boards. The higher grade ones do a better job of containing that pressure. But still, I say, if you're leaving your board in direct sunlight in those extreme conditions, make sure to keep an eye on your pressure and deflate, let some air out throughout the day. And then if you're ready to go back out again, just plug your pump back in, pump it back up to pressure, and then you go on the water. But it's a huge problem, and it's something you still have to be cautious about with the inflatable boards, is that direct sunlight. But for those who live in cooler climates, like, it's not necessarily that big of a deal. And people ask too, like, well, when I take my board home, do I need to deflate it every single time? And the great thing is actually you don't need to. And so you can just leave it inflated up, or you can just let some pressure out and still keep the majority in there and just throw it on your rack like you would a hardboard and go back out again. So
Yeah, good. So when you did use hardboards with the school, was it a little more challenging to keep them, like you said, from not, I don't know, hardboards tend to be even more sensitive in some way.
yeah, it's still, I mean, it's still kind of the same process. I mean, you're still like, if we're not using the boards and they're just sitting on the beach, we definitely don't have that to try to keep them in the shade. So I just stack them up in the big umbrella, keep them in the shade. That's really the biggest thing. And then afterwards, like we always clean our boards. If we're in salt water, we always rinse them off with fresh water afterwards to help prolong the life of the board. But yeah, the really biggest thing is the sun, the UV rays. And so unfortunately our boards, like after a few years of usage, like the biggest thing is the color of the board will be fading away because of all the sunlight it's been in throughout the years. But thankfully they've done pretty well. I only had one board that has been damaged in terms of like just over like the heat and also just the bumpy roads here as well. But other than that, the hard boards and the little boards have done pretty well.
Yeah. So you have a setup where you just bring them to the water?
Yeah. So I just rack them back in my truck and just stack them on there all stacked up and drop them all down to half the beach. And so works pretty good for what I need to, and it helps not having a trailer either because just a big surfboard. Yeah,
that's great. Well, I'm glad you, again, it's wonderful to have an in-person business and you reach people in La Paz. Sounds like you travel some too with it. But the YouTube channel and having good videos, which I just looked at a few of yours, but people really, maybe it's me too. We all learn in different ways. I'm a visual learner, so I want to see it, not just hear. Unfortunately, right here, we can't do that very easily in our little squares, show very much. But yeah, I hope people will check out your videos, especially the few who have mentioned that they were beginners and that's why they were listening back to basics. But again, there's things that even those of us who've paddled for a while can learn from going back and looking at some of those things, or how something is described. I love still taking clinics whenever I can from different people because they have different approaches, different ways of doing it. Yeah, definitely good. So what's you've traveled some, you're from the Midwest, you have lived in 2 places in Mexico. Tell us about some adventures you might have had, or maybe that you really want to do. Where have you paddled? Where do you want to paddle?
Man, there's all kinds of places I would love to paddle. My wife's from the Seattle, Washington area, so I'd love to go back up to Northwest and explore more around the lakes and the coves up there as well in the ocean. I've spent some time living also in Australia, and I've visited New Zealand as well. And both those locations I'd love to go back to with the experience that I have now to do more exploring around those areas. Just super beautiful. Just people who like, the people there also love the water as well, and they love being on the water. So just being in those kind of places where the culture kind of already exists in terms of people enjoying being on the water and just connecting with those people would be just an incredible opportunity. And so yeah, I'd love to do more of that. I'd love to connect more in the racing community and traveling as well, because that's growing every year. And so just having those hubs of people around the world who enjoy the sport as much as you do, love competing in it, is awesome. And so just using it as a way to even travel and see new places is racing. And so that's a great way.
Well, you'll have to come on up.
I know.
I'm just looking into flights, because San Diego, you can park in California in San Diego and walk over the border to the Tijuana airport. And there's some great deals, like flying to the Yucatan, direct flight for $9. Like, oh, okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm all about the travel and new places exploring. Really fun. So it's been quite an experience, and you've lived in multiple places. Is there anything you would tell yourself that you've learned through these years, like going back to when you first started? Would you have advice for that 2017?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the whole reason I do the educational side of paddleboarding and YouTube stuff is so people do what I didn't do when I started. Was like, when I started, I didn't take those classes. I didn't learn the techniques when I started learning or started going on a paddleboard. And that's my biggest regret, is not having those ideas of the safety of the environment that I'm paddling in, but also the techniques I need to paddle well in the environment also. And so I create a lot of bad techniques. And so when I learned the proper way of doing things, having to go back and correct those techniques is almost twice as hard, because your body's so trained to paddle a certain way or do a certain thing. And like, oh, that's not the proper way of doing it. I need to do it this way. It just takes a longer time to retrain your body to do it the correct way. And so my biggest recommendation I just tell people is like, take a class, and if you don't have a class that's available near you, like go online or find resources through a friend who's already involved in paddleboarding and pick their brain and understand some basic concepts before you go out for your first time. And that'll just set you up for so much more success in the future. And even if for some reason, like you decide you don't like it and it's not for you, well, at least you tried the right way the first time. And so
yeah,
it makes a big difference. And so that helps so much. And a lot of people too will go the first time and not know the right techniques and have a horrible experience and just think that's just the way it is. So obviously I'm just not good at it. And so they never try it again. And unfortunately, it's just super unfortunate because they probably wouldn't really enjoy it if they knew some of the right techniques to try. And so,
oh my gosh, I so agree. And I hear that when somebody says they've tried it, wasn't for me. I said,
yeah.
So where was it? What size board were you on? And often it was super rough conditions, one that shouldn't take a beginner on. And often, like your experience, some tiny little board that they weren't going to be able to balance on. So they thought,
yeah, exactly.
Like, no, we can get you on right equipment that's right for your size and ability and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have you said you've learned some surfing and over on different spots. Do you have a favorite thing about SUP? Do you have a favorite aspect of stand-up paddling?
I think it just goes back to I just love the exercise side of the sport. And so for me, like I grew up running track through the majority of my life and through university. So I love like the sports where you can just kind of push yourself as far as you want mentally and physically, because it is a team sport in some ways, but also in a lot of ways, it's really just an individualistic sport. So you're really like, your performance is based on what you can do yourself. And so for me, I think that goes back to my roots of just going out, and I just love pushing my body to new limits and just like getting that exercise from it. And like, I just love that side of the sun paddleboarding side, because you can do that on a flat water day. You can go out and some surf, and like so many different ways you can go out and try new things, but still get a super good exercise from it, from the health side of things.
Oh, that's great. So I would guess that your business is more people coming and going like tourists, but have you been able to form any kind of a community there? Is there an Ocean SUP team? Do you have anybody to work out with, or is it a solo?
Yeah, we're still pretty new to this area. We haven't been in Baja super long, only since March. And so it's only been like a handful of months. So we're still working on building a community here, trying to test the water to see what kind of people here are interested in the sport, and how can we get them involved. And we'd love to get more youth involved here, but it's working around what their schedules are like. And it's hard sometimes too for the youth here to have rides, get to certain beaches to get the right to where we're doing practices at or learning at. And so from Puerto Vallarta, we have a bigger community there, obviously, to kind of be involved in. So we really enjoyed that. But here in Baja, it's definitely a new place for us. We're working on rebuilding that community here to see what that likes for the future here, how can we really connect people in the sport, and get them excited about it, and on the right equipment as well. So
that's great. Well, good luck in all of that, and thank you. And super impressed with what you've already created and done it the right way. And what great tips and advice. Again, you guys should be following Ethan Huff on Instagram, and from Instagram, get to his YouTube. That sounds like it will keep growing. So keep making those great videos. I know you're not the only one, but I think it's a super important when somebody Googles something, because that's how we do it these days, that they hit on somebody who is doing it the right way and did have some training, and get that good information straight up early. Again, as you advised, if you can take something in person, take that lesson. But it's also cool to hear, as I talk to people who've built a business, because there are so many ways to enjoy stand-up paddling. Like if the athletic side of it and training is your side, hopefully some of the people who come through will want the next level, will want training, want to be a part of maybe a training group. So hopefully I get to meet you if I can figure out how to get to the Yucatan in November in person.
Absolutely.
Or maybe I love going south. I haven't been up to La Paz, but some of our top stand-up paddlers, like Fiona Wild, spends time in Los Barriles. A lot of the Hood River community go down there. That's their windy winter spot to be, I guess.
All that wing foiling.
Yeah, and then we didn't really talk about what's underwater, but way high on my list of creatures to paddle with and swim with are whale sharks, and I understand that that's something you've got in that area.
Yes, it's a big attraction.
I need to visit you just to do that. Because,
just for that.
Yeah. I think it'd be fantastic. Well, great talking with you. So appreciate you sharing your story and all your great information.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Hope to meet you soon.
Likewise. Thank you for your
Take
time.
care, and thanks everybody for listening. This is Sup Connect. It goes immediately to their IGTV, and then it will be on their YouTube and mine, KT Outside, within a couple days. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you joining us.